These two kids actually murdered a 2-year-old boy. You ever hear the term them kids? Well, this is exactly why. These kids are actually the worst in British history. Alright, so let's rewind to February 12th, 1993. And this is the case of John Venables and Robert Thompson. Two 10-year-old kids. Yeah, you heard me right. Holy crap, 10-year-old kids. These two kids managed to do something so awful that it left the entire country asking how kids could be so evil. But wait, let's start from the beginning. So John Venables and Robert Thompson were just two kids growing up in Liverpool, England. And they weren't exactly the type to bring home gold stars on their homework. Both of them came from rough, unstable homes. Venables was known to be pretty chaotic and had an abusive family life. His parents were separated and neither one cared much for him. And Thompson's mom, well, let's just say she wasn't winning any Parent of the Year awards either. She was a heavy drinker and he was one of 7 kids who didn't get much care. February 12th, 1993, Venables and Thompson decided to skip school. I mean, kids skipping school, yeah, not really that shocking. But it's what they did after that was truly evil. Now imagine this, it's a normal day at the New Strand Shopping Center in Bootle. Leave it to the British to name an area Bootle. I can already see the comments now. Well, at least our SKUs aren't shooting ranges. Yeah, so Venables and Thompson were wandering around the mall having skipped school to do, kid stuff. Like trying to steal whatever they could get their hands on, but that wasn't enough for them. Nope, they had something a lot worse in mind. So at some point during their mall stealing, the boys noticed a 2-year-old named James Bulger. He was with his mom, Denise, but as every parent knows, it's impossible to keep an eye on your kid 24/7. In one split second, just one, Denise looked away and Venables and Thompson made their move. Want some Pokemon cards? I mean, the poor kid responded probably with like goo goo gaga. I mean, the kid was like 2 years old, man, come on. So one step at a time, pretending to be his friend, they led James away from the store and his mother would never see him again. Yep, 2 kids took another kid. And like you would expect, no one noticed. I mean, these were just kids being themselves, right? People even saw them walking with the little James, but they honestly thought nothing of it. It was like, oh, how sweet, big brother's taking care of the little guy. If only they knew. They took James on a nearly 2.5-mile walk through Liverpool. And yes, you're probably wondering, why didn't anyone stop them? Well, several people did actually notice, but when Venables and Thompson said James was their brother, or that he was just lost, everyone just shrugged it off. So like after wandering the streets for hours, the boys led James to a railway. Now, let me just say this right now, what happens next is awful and viewer discretion is advised. The boys start by torturing James. And for obvious reasons, I'm not gonna draw the kid in these scenes because, like, come on. Anyways, they threw bricks and stones at him, they kicked him, and even shoved paint into his eyes. I mean, can you even imagine? This is a 2-year-old kid we're talking about. He didn't stand a chance. At some point during this brutal attack, Venables and Thompson dropped James on his head, which is probably what finally unalived him. Then, in one final act, they placed his lifeless body on the train tracks of Walton and Anfield Station in Liverpool, hoping a train would hit him and cover up what they did. The train, like you would expect, did eventually run over James, but by that time, he was already dead. And these sick 10-year-old kids went home like nothing happened. Now, as you would imagine, when James was reported missing and the boy's mom was going crazy, scared for her little boy, the police jumped to action. But with no leads and no real idea of what happened, they worked against the clock. It wasn't until 2 days later, on February 14th, that James's body was found still on the tracks and hit by the train. But the authorities saw the injuries on the kid and thought, hey, it just could have been from the train. But since when do trains throw rocks? And hold on, let me tell you, it was so brutal that the police initially thought an adult must have done this. But surprise, the real shock came when CCTV footage from the shopping mall was released. It showed James walking with the 2 monsters that were only 10 years old. And boxheads, let me tell you, the public was stunned. I mean, everyone was expecting some shadowy figure, some monstrous adult, but it was 2 kids. On February 20th, 1993, Venables and Thompson were arrested. Drop the Pokemon cards and put your hands in the air. And get this, when they were taken in for questioning, neither of them showed any real remorse. Venables cried during his confession, but honestly, it was hard to tell if it was out of guilt or fear of him getting caught. Thompson, on the other hand, was cold as ice. Like, how does a 10-year-old even process what he just did? Their trial became a circus. These 2 boys weren't even teenagers yet, but they were being tried as adults. Good, buddy, good. Eat your goddamn crumpets in jail, you sick f***. Anyways, now imagine that. Kids in court being held responsible for one of the most disgusting freaking crimes the UK had ever seen, topping even the Great Tea and Crumpets heist of 1990. Trigger warning for the British. Just kidding. That's not real, but guys, the dentists are. Okay, enough of the jokes, my bad. I forgot to mention that during the trial, it came out that Venables and Thompson had actually planned all of this. Nope, it wasn't just a random thing. They had actually tried to kidnap another child earlier that day, but the kid's mom intervened. They found all of this out during a witness testimony. The mom just scolded the boys and they ran off. Yeah, you heard me correctly. They had every intention of doing this from the start. Wanna trade a Pokemon card? Nah, let's just murder. Like what? Venables and Thompson were convicted of James Bulger's murder in November 1993. They were sentenced to be held at Her Majesty's pleasure, which is really British way of saying that they were locked up for good. But here's the part that really gets people and even me. They were both released in 2001 when they were just 18 years old. Yep, they just got new identities and tried to live their lives like nothing happened. I mean, isn't that gross? The same kids who brutally murdered a young toddler were released back into society like, nothing happened. Venables, though, couldn't seem to keep his life together after his release. He was arrested in 2010 for possessing child videos, which I'm not gonna talk more about that. Let's just say, not exactly shocking, right? He was sent back to prison and was released again in 2013. And then, because he clearly didn't learn, he was busted again in 2017. For, you guessed it, more child, yeah. This time, he got a 40-month sentence. Okay, couldn't they just axe this guy? Like, he's not learning clearly. Gosh. And as for Thompson, well, not much is known about him. I mean, he's been flying under the radar, successfully staying out of the limelight. Okay, so that last one was rough, but it doesn't get any better. You've probably heard some wild stories before, probably here on the page, but this one, oh, it's on a whole nother level. We're talking about Amarjeet Sada, an 8-year-old boy who's probably the youngest damn serial killer in history. Don't quote me on that. So Amarjeet Sada was born in 1998 in the village of Begusaraya in the Indian state Bihar. You're probably picturing a small, tight-knit community where everyone knows each other, and you'd be right. Amarjeet came from an extremely poor family. His dad scrapped together whatever work he could find, and like many families, life wasn't exactly easy for them. But what no one realized was just how much darkness had already crept into Amarjeet's young mind. Amarjeet did something absolutely disgusting and killed his first victim. Who was that? It was his own cousin, a 6-month-old baby. Amarjeet lured his baby cousin away from the family's watchful eyes and brutally assassinated her. After killing his cousin, you'd think someone would report this, right? Well, not quite. The family, for reasons that still boggle my box mind, decided to stay quiet. Some think that it's just out of shame or fear of looking like bad parents, but regardless of why, no one called the authorities and Amarjeet walked away without any punishment. And if you're thinking, okay, well, that's an isolated incident, surely that was the end of it. Well, you would be, in fact, box dead wrong. Fast forward a bit and we've got another victim. This time it was Amarjeet's own baby sister who was less than a year old. Yeah, you heard that correctly. He killed his own sister. And he did it exactly the same way as before, luring her away and ending her life before anyone could stop him. And again, the family didn't say a word. I mean, could you imagine 2 infants from the same family brutally killed by their 8-year-old son? And then they just stayed quiet? Once again, my mind, in its box shape, be boggling, bro. And you have to ask, what was going on with Amarjeet? I mean, was the kid just evil? No one can really say for sure, and it's not like anyone was rushing to get help at this point either. So naturally, this story did not stop here. Here's where things go from a box to a goddamn head. Amarjeet's third victim was the neighbor's baby girl, only 6 months old. Yeah, you could probably see a pattern forming here. This kid had some sort of obsession with unaliving babies. On this particular day in 2007, Amarjeet found the perfect opportunity. The baby's mother, likely trusting that no one in her small village would harm her tiny baby child, left her daughter unattended reportedly at a small school. You know, just for a little bit. And that's all Amarjeet needed. He took the baby, carried her off to a secluded area, and well, you know the rest. When the body was found this time, the truth could not stay buried. The locals quickly connected the dots, realizing that Amarjeet had been around during the time of the baby's disappearance. And when they confronted him, he calmly admitted to the murder. Amarjeet, are you killing babies again? No, Papa, no. Telling lies? Kicks a rock. Some boxheads in the comments might ask, why is my Indian accent so well? I don't know. More box set lore. Anyways, this 8-year-old boy casually confessed to killing not just this baby, but the other two as well. No remorse, no tears, like he did not care. When Amarjeet was arrested in 2007, the police were just in shock. They had never dealt with anything like this before. An 8-year-old serial killer? Like, even I haven't heard of that. I mean, my job is literally to cover the weirdest, most shocking, most disgusting stories on the internet, which if you want to hear more, hit that subscribe button, but that's besides the point. Anyways, according to reports, when asked why he did it, Amarjeet simply smiled. The boy's family finally spoke up after his arrest, admitting that they knew about the earlier murders but didn't report them. I mean, you'd think after the first death, something would have clicked, right? But since this part of the world doesn't have much law enforcement, the parents were not arrested for the cover-up. I mean, what do you guys think? Comment if you think that's fair. Like, should they have got in trouble? I don't know. Not for me to say. But no, they decided to stay quiet, and these 3 innocent babies lost their lives because of this monster, and I guess the people that helped him. Amarjeet was placed in a juvenile detention facility, which is kids' jail if you didn't know. Which is where things, again, get a little bit complicated. You see, in India, the legal system is a bit different when it comes to child criminals. At the time of his arrest, Indian law didn't allow children under the age of 18 to be formally charged with murder. So Amarjeet was sent to a children's home instead of a prison. And since juvenile records are sealed, there's been little information about what happened to him since. He could be out there in the world right now. Like, seriously, he could be watching this video. Weird. This next child murderer is actually a little girl. Ooh, fight the patriarchy. I'm kidding. Okay, so her name was Mary Bell, who, you guessed it, was another child killer. In 1968, an 11-year-old girl from Newcastle, England, got some fame for doing things most children don't even think is possible, which is, again, killing people. First, let's rewind to Mary's childhood because trust me, it's a big part of understanding how all this even happened. Mary Bell was born on May 26, 1957, to Betty Bell, who was a lady of the night, we'll say. With the father, you may have guessed it, being a lady of the night is unknown. In fact, Betty reportedly tried to give Mary away multiple times, and she abused her daughter both physically and emotionally. I mean, how's that for a loving start in life, right? Oh, and I forgot to mention that there's strong evidence that Betty forced Mary to engage in, you know, weird kind of acts with her clients when she was as young as 5 years old. On May 25th, 1968, just a day before Mary's 11th birthday, she committed her first murder. Her victim, 4-year-old Martin Brown. Mary knew Martin from their neighborhood. I mean, she lured Martin into an abandoned house in the area that the kids would play at. That's where she strangled him to death. Then, after killing him, she just walked away. No remorse, no panic. It's as if she didn't quite grasp the gravity of what she just did. There wasn't a missing persons report. His body was found shortly after by other kids that were, you know, playing there. The thing is, at first, no one suspected a murderer, and Martin's death was ruled an accident. They thought he just fell somewhere. There were no visible signs of trauma, and the idea that a little girl would have killed him, well, no one was thinking along those lines. So, like you would expect, the case was closed temporarily. Now, if you're thinking good old Mary Bell would lay low after her first murder, well, I mean, this is where you're wrong. Just a few days later, Mary and her friend Norma Bell, they got the same last name but no relation, it's just a weird coincidence. Anyways, they broke into a nursery and trashed the place. They wrote disturbing messages like, "I murder so that I may come back," and "We did murder Martin Brown." Yeah, talk about a crazy cry for attention, am I right? But get this, the police brushed it off like it was some prank. I mean, what are the odds that 2 little girls would be actually confessing to a murder? Maybe the cops should listen a little bit more. Then came the second murder. On July 31st, 1968, just 2 months after Martin Brown's death, Mary struck again. This time her victim was 3-year-old Brian Howe. Now, Mary's behavior during this murder was even more disturbing. She strangled Brian just like she'd done with Martin, but this time she took it a bit further. After Brian was dead, she mutilated his body with scissors. Yeah, scissors, cutting his hair and scratching up his legs. She even carved an M for Mary into his stomach. If you didn't already think that this case was horrifying enough, this part should really make you cringe. Oh, and I forgot to mention that Mary's accomplice in the second murder was once again her friend Norma Bell. After Brian's body was found, police police quickly realized that this wasn't an accident. They suspected murder this time, and that's when they started putting the pieces together. So, how did the police catch Mary Bell? Well, it turns out that Mary couldn't keep her mouth shut. She started acting strangely, asking neighbors if they missed Brian, and even taking people to the scene of the crime as if she wanted to relive the moment. She also made comments to the police saying things like, "I know what happened to Brian because I saw him last." Not exactly subtle. When police began questioning local children, both Mary and Norma's names kept coming up. Witnesses said that they kept seeing the two girls with Brian on the day of his murder, and their suspicious behavior made them prime suspects. During interrogations, Mary tried to pin the blame on Norma, but it didn't take long for the police to figure out who the real leader was. On August 7th, 1968, Mary Bell was officially arrested and charged with 2 counts of murder. And for you guys wondering, she was only 11 years old. Yeah, you heard me correctly. An 11-year-old girl was charged with murdering 2 toddlers. Mary's trial began in December 1968, and let me tell you, it was a mess. People were fascinated and yet horrified by the idea of a child killer. Like perhaps you watching this video. The prosecution argued that Mary was fully aware of what she was doing and that her actions were deliberate and calculated. But the defense claimed that Mary suffered from a personality disorder and lacked the emotional capacity to understand the full extent of her crimes. Plus, this was a time when people didn't really know what to make of child criminals. She was evil, or she was just a product of her environment. I guess we still kind of don't know that. I mean, I don't know. What do you guys think in the comments? In the end, Mary was convicted of manslaughter, not murder, because the jury accepted that she was suffering from a psychopathic disorder. Mary Bell was sentenced and detained at Her Majesty's pleasure, which again is British for possibly forever. Now imagine that, being 11 years old and sentenced to who knows how many years behind bars. So what happened to Mary after all of this? Well, she served 12 years in various institutions before being released in 1980 at the age of 23. And get this, when she was released, she was given a new identity to protect her from the public. I mean, can you really blame them? A child killer out in the world with a real name? Yeah, that would have been a media frenzy. But that's not quite where the story ends. In 1998, Mary Bell co-authored a book with a journalist, Gita Sereni, titled Cries Unheard: The Story of Mary Bell. In it, she gives her story of the murders and blames much of her actions on the abuse she suffered at the hands of her mother, which I told you at the beginning. The book was met with outrage from the families of her victims, and understandably so. But listen, if you want to hear about more deadly killers, click this video right here where I talk about the deadliest killers on death row. Trust me, you don't want to miss that video. Do you still not trust me yet? Are you gonna click it?